Good afternoon, brothers and sisters, and welcome once again to the Self-Improvement Basis for Community Development Talk Show. I'm your weekly host, Brother James Muhammad, and I'm honored to have on this show our friends in the community who's working hard in the community, our brothers and sisters from the Black Autonomy Federation. We have Mr. and Mrs. Irvin. We also have Rico Dowdy as a guest today. Today we're going to discuss certain issues as it relates to the community and the police department, Memphis City Police Department. And for those who are not quite familiar with you, what is the Black Autonomy Federation? What inspired you all to start this work here?
Well, the Black Autonomy Federation got started in June of 2012, and we were initially getting started to work on issues of affecting poor and low-income black people in Memphis whom we feel do not have a voice in the city in terms of getting their issues dealt with. But shortly after we started in June of 2012, there was this whole rash of killings of people by the Memphis Police Department. And so we started the Black Autonomy Cop Watch because we began to monitor the number of people that were being killed. And by July of 2012, between February of 2012 and July 2012, the Memphis police had killed 7 people. That was almost one a month. So that's what we were wondering, what is going on here? Why are there so many killings of people in the city by the police? We began to monitor that.
Okay, now, is this in relationship to the police? Is there a civil board that watch over the actions of the police department also in Shelby County? Have you tried working with them? How hard is it to get your voices heard in the community as relates to the media, the police department also?
There is no effective organization in the government of the city of Memphis. Nothing that people can trust. Going back to the prior administration, city government administration here, there was the creation of this Citizens Law Enforcement Review Board, but it was abandoned because it was totally ineffective. It was not willing to challenge the authorities themselves, and it was basically under the control of the police department. Well, it was re-established recently under this administration because there were so many complaints about the police using excessive force. But we don't feel that it in any way, shape, or form really constitutes any break on the type of police terrorism of the black community in this city. Let me just point this out. Memphis, Tennessee has the highest number of police killings of anywhere in the country over the last 3 years. Over the last 3 years, there's no city, no matter its size, whether it's New York, Philadelphia, or wherever, that has had more people killed in a brief period of time. We're talking about really an 18-month period. There's been more people killed here than anywhere. So it is a problem. It's a systemic problem, and it goes back a considerable ways. And what we're trying to do, one of the reasons we became involved was that there was no one speaking out. The civil rights groups that ordinarily would speak out, the NAACP and these other organizations, refused to take a voice or a posture in opposition to the police shootings. And all the so-called peace organizations, the so-called Mid-South Peace and Justice Center and the rest of them, are in bed with the police authorities. So there's no one challenging these people whatsoever. So, and we created this organization with the perspective and understanding that we would have to step up and try to build an organization of the family members, build an organization of concerned citizens in the community, and that we would have to be the effective organization in place of those who have failed the community.
Okay, now, when you name black organization, NAACP, Urban League, all of these organizations, why do you think they refuse to get involved? Is it because of the race, creed, and color of the individual that the police have killed?
Well, I think part of the problem is there's been such a serious problem in Memphis of criminalization, particularly criminalization of black youth. And unfortunately, many people in the community believe that if you are black and the police stop you or they shoot you or they kill you, they think, well, you must be guilty. So I think that too many people in our community have fallen prey to that. So I think that the civil rights groups have fallen. They have fallen behind in their duty. Let's take the NAACP, for example. For a while, on a national level, they had a campaign against police brutality. It was part of the national strategy. But you wouldn't know that here in Memphis because the local chapter did not do that. And furthermore, at least as of recently, and perhaps still currently, the head of the Memphis NAACP is in fact a paid consultant of the Memphis Police Department. So there's a conflict of interest there. If you are, leading the NAACP, but you're getting a consulting fee from the police department, then you might not be too anxious to investigate any wrongdoing that's going on. So we feel that the civil rights groups in the city are basically collaborating with the police, in terms of not covering up what's going on with the police. That's what we feel. That's one of our jobs, is to bring that information out.
Okay, now, you're not trying to get in the way of the police department doing their job. We know they have a hard job. Sometimes their lives are there, but you're talking about the types of killings that might be considered without investigation or with investigation justifiable homicide. I have a list of 23 men here or more that have been killed by the Memphis Police Department. Now, were these investigated? And if they was investigated, what was the ruling on the investigation? And why was it ruled?
Well, one of the controversies about the so-called investigations that have been done in all these cases is that they've been done by the police department themselves or by other police agencies that are in league with the authorities. So for instance, the 15-year-old kid here, Justin Thompson, that was killed in 2013, I think it was, in September 2013, he was shot and killed by a so-called off-duty police officer. Now, this officer had killed a young black man only 2 years before that, and the investigation into that was never conclusive. And so he goes out and he kills a 15-year-old kid, and then they cover it up by bringing in the state police. The state police issue a report, but then they say that that report cannot be obtained, or the results of that report cannot be given to the public. And so what we're talking about is a collusion and cover-up. Collusion and cover-up in the sense that the police authorities here have not been subjected to any independent investigation. We're not talking about the federal government having come in and investigated in any of these cases. Not even one of these cases have been investigated by the federal authorities. In addition to that, however, we're talking about collusion in the sense that the local federal agency here, the United States Attorney, is in bed he's in bed with the police and judicial authorities of this city. And the reason that we know this is because he himself has members of his family in the local law enforcement establishment. So it just as you got a situation in Ferguson where people are complaining about the district attorney being, one, a racist, two, having so many ties to the local law enforcement establishment, we got that same problem here. We got that problem with Mr. Stanton, who's supposed to be the United States Attorney. And let me just point this out. The United States Attorney and the President of the United States, or the Attorney General of the United States, has the authority through a number of pieces of legislation to actually criminally prosecute police officers that use excessive force or that engage in criminal conduct to cover up a case where a person has lost their life. This is well known. So what we've got is willful cover-up. We've got a willful process in place here where a 15-year-old kid has been killed, where there's been a 19-year-old kid killed here in Memphis, where a blind man was choked to death, where 2 people were shot and killed in their cars asleep. We've had a succession of these kinds of cases where there's no question whatsoever that these were not justifiable. They were not justifiable. And they're only justifiable because the local authorities sat and colluded to cover up the real essence of these cases. And just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, the medical examiner for Shelby County and the district attorney sit down with the so-called police shooting team. And they sit down and they manufacture a case, and they decide right then and there whether or not there's going to be a criminal prosecution of an officer. And no surprise there that there never has been and there never will be such a case because of this kind of insider process, which is really a criminal cover-up. It's a criminal obstruction of justice. And so this is what we got in this city. We got criminals running the system themselves We got people covering up the death of even children. Even black children are being covered up. Their deaths are being covered up. So let's be clear about that. And if we look at it that way, then we can understand Ferguson. This is why the government here, the officials and some of these so-called peaceniks that work with the police department, these people won't speak about what's happening in Memphis. They won't talk about even one case of people being killed here in Memphis, but they'll scream and holler about what's happening in Ferguson. And this is beyond, a disgrace. This is a willful cover-up.
Okay, now, I have a few names here I'd like to call out. We have Jeremy McCraven, William Howlett, Randy Green, Dwayne Bailey, Christian Freeman, Hernandez Dowding, Lorenzo Davis, Dolores Epps, Michaela Ross, Justin Thompson, Charles Livington, Donald Moore, Stephen Askew, Horace Whiting, and George Golding, Daniel Brock. We got Justin Hunter, M. Justice Hunter, correct me if I'm wrong, John Walker, Byron Kelly, Jonathan Taylor, Marvin Emerson, Aaron Dumas, and really the list goes on. Out of all those names, how many of those are African American?
At least 20 of them are African American.
African American.
They are. 20 of them are. Memphis is a majority black city, so in some ways I guess that's not surprising that the majority of people who were killed would be black, but yes, at least 20 of them are. In our organization, we make no distinction, though, in terms of race, creed, color, sex, religion, or anything. We are looking at anyone who is killed by the police or a law enforcement officer or who dies in their custody. So we're not, their race or ethnicity makes no difference to us. We're looking, the common denominator is they were killed by the police or they died in the custody of the police. That's what we look at.
But of course, when there is a massive number, the majority, in fact, of people who are killed are African American, then there is no question that you have to come to some conclusions that this is a racial form of terrorism here. I mean, if the police can be used as a death squad, as a police death squad to kill people without regard to legal process, that is taking people into prosecute them in court or whatever the case may be, if they're killing them on the street, unarmed people, or beating somebody to death or choking somebody to death, then that is a crime in and of itself. And the only reason that it has not been prosecuted in Memphis particularly is because of the collusion of those in high places. So let's be clear about that. We have a problem here that is not based on individual cases. What we got here is almost like a serial murder campaign. Where the police just routinely shoot and kill people in circumstances that there should not have been any shooting. And let me point out this, and this is an extremely important thing to note at this time. The Obama administration went into a number of cities. Newark is one city they went to, and certainly they went to New Mexico. And they went in and talked about how people were killed in New Mexico. And I think there were something like 20 people or 23 people killed in 4 years in New Mexico. Well, Memphis is much worse because you're talking about 18 people, I should say 18 months, you're talking about 23 people being killed. So as I said, Memphis far and away leads the entire nation, but they refuse to come here. They refuse to come here for political reasons because they got ties to the existing power structure here and so forth, and the black politicians, and they refuse to come here because the people who are being killed are seen to be expendable or that they are of a class that they're not, a class and a race that they simply are not concerned about. So I'm just going to say it like it is. And so that's why we have to be, black people particularly have to be concerned about these kinds of killings where we're being targeted.
Brothers and sisters, you're just now tuning in to the Self-Improvement Basis for Community Development Talk Show. I'm sitting here with my brothers and sisters of the Black Autonomy Federation as we talk about police brutality. We also have on the show our brother Rico Dowding, who brother is a victim of police brutality, who was shot Brother Rico, tell us something about your case and what inspired you to be a part of this fight.
Well, about 27 months ago, he was shot in the back. I never could get any answers from the Memphis Police Department. I went every month for 16 months to the Homicide Department, to the Attorney General's office. I actually had a homicide detective say he's very curious to see what happens in this case because the whole police department was watching it at the time. There were no facts that he had a weapon. He was shot in the back, that was a fact. And even at the time, I lost energy because it took so long to get answers. I went and asked for an autopsy, which was public record. I was told that you have to report back to the Memphis Police Department. Kept saying that it was under investigation for 16 months, consistently under investigation. So I went to the Attorney General's office, the District Attorney's office. When I mentioned my brother's name in the waiting room, no one acted like they knew who he was. But once we got behind closed doors and out of the waiting room, a gentleman told me that, yes, we are on this case. We're watching it very seriously. The young lady filed a false carjacking report. We're trying to arraign her on charges as well. I took that as, I sat back and took faith in the police department, thinking that they were having plans to file charges against the young lady for the false carjacking report that actually started the whole deal, and that the police officer, which was let go by the Memphis Police Department, that he was going to be brought up on charges. I lost wind, and just like most people probably in Memphis, we go through so many emotions from losing a loved one that you lose energy. You lose the willpower until they drag it out so long that you possibly give up. The Ferguson deal, what actually brought my attention, and actually a phone call from my mother that in her tearing voice wanted to know why it wasn't her baby on television, and why didn't Jesse Jackson come to her baby's funeral. Al Sharpton didn't come to her baby's funeral, which, by the way, I did email each and every one of those. The Michael Baisley show, I emailed them, no response. That's what fueled my fire, the hurt in my mother's voice, that I was guilty of not leading the fight for my family, and I'm ashamed of it. It's 27 months, but I promise you, I will not stop until we have justice for his killing.
Okay. Now, that whole process, is it because they're trying to wear the relatives and loved one down so they can stop fighting?
Well, that's certainly part of it. But it's an important thing to understand this. In our case, we've also been trying to get information for the same period of time that he's talking about for quite some time, almost 2 years, 2.5 years, to get information about persons who died in police custody, as well as information about what the policies and the procedures are for use of deadly force and the way that they run the department. And this thing about the shooting team, which we got that information actually about the shooting team from a person who was not even in the department. I can't call his name, but a person who was highly placed, in the Shelby County administration, gave us the information about how the police department actually meets with the medical examiner and meets with the district attorney, which is illegal. It's an obstruction of justice. But when so we're looking at a situation where in his case, they know it's murder. They knew from inception it was murder, and they claim they falsely misled it to, as you said, to drain the energy out, to frustrate you, that they wouldn't give him information, even what documents that he's entitled to by state law from the medical examiner's office or from the police department. They did us the same way. We through a series of requests, we even went so far as to go downtown and have a demonstration downtown in front of City Hall. And this bulldog, or whatever it is on Channel 24, went in and asked the mayor about it, and the mayor claimed he didn't know what we were asking for. Well, we were very scrupulous in what we were asking for. We were detailed in what we were asking for. And it's just that the police department and the government here, the city government, is covering up. They're engaged in a criminal conspiracy to cover up for officers who have committed civil rights violations and outright murder. So when we're saying this, if we looked at the whole thing with Justin Thompson, the fact that his cause of death and the fact that the details of his death were even covered up by the state police tell us that it's a far-reaching conspiracy in this city, that it is not in the city and in the state, that in fact it is law enforcement covering it up at every stage of the proceedings that you can point to. So we have to go outside of the law enforcement community. We have to build a citizens movement. This is what we're trying to do, is to try to build a citizens movement. And Memphis people have to understand that you cannot enforce the law by using what is essentially a death squad method. Just kill somebody, kill anybody that you want to kill, to try to say, well, we're going to clean the streets by killing so-called social vermin. They're not vermin, they're human beings, and the police have no right to kill them. You want to take them into court, you want to prosecute them, prove a case against them, but don't murder them in the streets and then say that that you're justified doing it, and then have the high-level authorities just protect the department, and then fire the officer, as they did in the case of in the Doughty case. They fired the officer. They did the same identical thing in the case of Justin Thompson. When the questions became too intense in that case, he was fired as well. So what we're talking about is that is not justice. That's not justice. Our saying is stop police murder, prosecute the cops.
Okay, now we're Hernandez Downing case came out in the paper. And once they found out that the car wasn't jacked, what continued after that process? Why was he shot? Where was he shot at?
Well, this is fact. The actual carjacking was actually a false carjacking report. They told him, do not pursue. Even if my brother carjacked a car, even if he had a high-speed chase, even if he had an accident, he still has the right to be apprehended and not shot in the back with no weapon. If you're an officer, I believe that you should have a physical every year to see that you're physically fit to chase down these criminals, because nobody's going to sit and wait on them to catch them. When he was shot in the back, he was told he said that he told him that he had a gun. Even if he told him he had a gun, he never saw a gun. So I never made sense of it. So if he had a gun, why wasn't he shot in the front of his body? If he was threatening a cop with a gun, why was he shot in his back? And I never can get any answers about that.
Was there any gun found?
No guns found.
No gun found.
No gun found.
Brother Muhammad, let me say something about that. The U.S. Supreme Court made a ruling back in the 1980s. This was on a case of a kid here in Memphis, a teenager who was shot and killed. He was only about 14 or 15 years old at the time, and his family later filed a lawsuit. He was shot and killed while allegedly running from the police. And the Supreme Court ruling dealt with what's so-called fleeing felons. And the Supreme Court ruled that police officers do not have a right to shoot fleeing felons because they don't pose a threat, all right? If you're running away from the police, you don't pose a threat. And so what we have here in Memphis, Brother Hernandez Doughty was shot and killed while running in violation of the fleeing U.S. Supreme Court ruling on fleeing felons. So the police officer who killed him violated that. The Memphis Police Department has routinely ignored that. Mr. Doughty was not the only person shot and killed in 2012, 2013 who was shot while running away from the police. So the police department here violates even U.S. Supreme Court rulings. This officer who killed Mr. Doughty should have been brought to trial, should have been brought to justice. If he was told to stop pursuing him, they knew that he did not steal the car, he should have stopped pursuing him. He should not have shot him in the back. So he needs to be brought to trial. There's no statute of limitations on murder, so he can be brought to trial at any time. We certainly hope that he will be. That's what he should be brought to trial.
Ms. Irvin, let me add something to that. There's a fact that he's never even been brought to the Attorney General's office in consideration of filing any charges. It's we have fired him and we give him a pass for prosecuting him for murder.
Now, let me ask you this question. From my understanding, the investigation stated that that officer actually received a call that there wasn't a carjacking and do not pursue. Is that correct?
To my knowledge, that's correct.
That's an open fact. I mean, there's never been any doubt about that. You can find that out easily on the police logs if they would ever release them. But, you know, what you got here is not just a departmental violation. You know, you've got actually an abuse of authority, which has led to the loss of life. You've got on federal law, you've got a civil rights violation that's led to loss of life that could be prosecuted and the officer receive up to life in prison in criminal court, federal criminal court. And so, I mean, the laws are on the books, but what you've got and what you have had for quite some time is the kind of collusion and the collusion and the good old boy network among the police here that refuses to acknowledge wrongdoing and refuses to prosecute it. And what they'll do, even to give themselves coverage from civil action, they'll fire the officer. And then they'll turn around and conveniently rehire the officer at a later stage when they feel like there's less public outrage over it. And this is what they're attempting to do in Mr. Dowdy's, his killer is attempting to get his job back. And this is exactly what, in fact, Terrence Shaw, who killed 15-year-old Justin Thompson, tried to do, was to come along later, a year later or so, and get his job back, ask for his job. And because he felt like he wasn't going to be prosecuted, why not, you know? And so what people have to understand here is, you know, if they do not speak up, some terrible crimes will take place by those in authority. And that cannot be excused. That cannot be justified. And you can't protect your own children if you don't speak up for children like Justin Thompson.